If we're to believe the commercialized hype, this is the most wonderful time of the year. But reality is there's too much darkness. Wars, brokenness, violence, oppression, heartache, grief, betrayal, addiction, abuse in the world to pretend that it doesn't exist. The harsh reality of an ugly world doesn't magically disappear in December for the sake of secularized moments and plastic good cheer. And it's against this romanticized portrait of the holiday that the first two chapters of Matthew brings us an Advent narrative more in line with reality. By contrasting the lives of two prominent men, Joseph and Herod, Matthew prepares us to see the Jesus that's already here by portraying the world as it really is. I mean, let's face it, the announcement of the birth of Jesus wasn't joyful for Joseph. It was shocking and it was heartbreaking. His fiancée was pregnant with a child that wasn't his. Matthew 1:19 calls Joseph a righteous man, which begs the question, why do bad things happen to good people? But there's nothing about our allegiance to God that makes us immune to heartache and disappointment. The angel doesn't tell him, hey, don't worry, Joseph, problem solved. Or good news, things are gonna get better. Or Joseph, buck it up. It's the most wonderful time of the year. As a matter of fact, in Matthew 1:20, the angel says, fear not. It's a recognition that fear is an understandable human response. But it's also a call to resistance, a refusal to let the trauma of external circumstances consume Jonah with fear. And if we're to acknowledge the reality of a broken world, we also have to focus to live not in fear, to fear not. Why? Because of the promise. She will give birth to a son, and you will call him Yeshua, because he will save his people from their sins. Through Joseph, Matthew challenges us to stay focused on the daily choices and everyday challenges that come as the cost of following Messiah. Standing in great contrast to the righteous Joseph is the villainous, murderous Herod the Great. In history, we learn that Herod killed 3 sons, his grandfather-in-law, and one of his wives because he perceived them as a threat to his power. As a Jew, Herod made hollow promises to his countrymen living in Roman Jerusalem. He promised to build them a magnificent temple for worship. But while building the temple, he also built himself palaces and fortresses all throughout Judea in the hopes of shoring up his power and his position. Through these 2 men, Matthew shows us 2 responses to God, and both are in the context of fear. Joseph's fear was of scandal and trauma and uncertainty about his future. Herod's fear was losing his control, his power, his authority, but he was also fearful about his future. Matthew doesn't want us to find Jesus apart from our world or apart from our time, but to find the presence of Jesus right in the midst of this world, in our lives right now. Matthew 1:23 quotes Isaiah saying that the virgin will give birth to a son and call his name Emmanuel, God with us. He ends his gospel with these parting words from Jesus, I am with you always. The Greek playwright Aeschylus said, even in our sleep, pain that we cannot forget falls drop by drop upon our heart. But then comes wisdom to us by the awful grace of God. So on this second week of Advent, may you experience that awful grace of God in the midst of your lives, in every present moment. May you come to know the joy that comes in trusting God in the midst of your hardship. And may you always remember that Emmanuel is with you always.